Virtual reality and flight simulators. There is almost no better combination. And luckily for you, if you are looking for one, in 2024 there are quite a few VR flight simulators to choose from, so let's go over the best. We start with a flight simulator that I think deserves much more attention. It performs fantastically in VR and you actually don't need an expensive hostess. You can do everything with your VR controllers. This is Aerofly FS4, and if you have ever flown yourself as a passenger in an Airbus or Boeing and wanted to know how it would be to fly one of these beasts yourself, this is your simulator. It is great for flying commercial airliners, has satellite imagery so the ground actually looks pretty decent, but what's best, and I have said it already, you can do everything with your hands via the controllers. Switching or rotating knobs, pulling levers, etc. It is extremely immersive this way. No need to bind anything to your keyboard or stick, you just touch it. And that's what VR is all about. One of the very few simulators that have handled hand tracking this well. Besides that, you have a wide variety of airplanes to choose from, the Airbus, Boeing, even the Concorde, or a very old World War II transport plane. For many of these planes, you can do a cold and dark startup, and for which button to press, etc., that can all be found on their website. For just flying, it is great. Just know that there is no multiplayer, no full realistic ATC or anything of the sort, but if you are looking for a somewhat chilled experience with great immersion and very much fine-tuned for VR, Aerofly FS4 is your way to go. Another flight simulator that does the hand tracking very well is VTOL VR. Not as relaxing as Aerofly FS4, as in VTOL VR, combat is involved. This sim is made from the ground up for VR and therefore, of course, runs very well. Again, you only need your VR controllers to fly, no hostess, and that might make you think, can that work? Is that not clumsy? Well, I had the same thoughts until I tried it. Grabbing the stick or using the throttle with just the VR controllers works so well. The graphics at first might throw you off, but in VR it is actually decent. This is one of those games you start up and you don't have to tweak the settings for a week to make it run alright. All the indicators are perfectly clear and, well, now this is not an easy simulator. Besides learning how to operate the plane, you need to get your head around all the combat mechanics. There are multiple rockets, bombs, and besides that, quite some systems to get your head around in order to shoot other planes down. But once you get the grasp of it, it is super satisfying. Besides that, it offers an amazing array of workshop content, missions, and you can pretty much fly everything in co-op or against each other. There are also some planes and even a helicopter where one can be the pilot and the other can be the gunner, requiring great communication, and doing that together in VR is just fantastic. And I would say, if you want to get into VR combat flight simulators, but DCS is somewhat too complex for you, this is the perfect game to start with. Because yes, if you want to make the next step, DCS in VR could be your gem. Now, this game is playable in VR, but was not made for it. It requires quite some tweaking to get things running in VR. I have made some guides on it, especially if you do not have a very beefy computer. Because you need a decent computer to get things running here. But oh boy, once it runs in VR, it will be hard to get into other sims. DCS offers full fidelity planes, or in other words, sitting in, for example, an F-16, all the freaking knobs and the buttons do something. Now, this game doesn't have the hand tracking as in Aerofly FS4 or VTOL VR, but the graphics, the fidelity of the planes, the flight model, just once you lift up in VR and see the ground beneath you getting smaller, it's freaking amazing. Especially in headsets as the Primax Crystal, taking off from, example, an aircraft carrier in the Tomcat, as you can see here, is just, well, freaking speechless. DCS VR can really make your dream come true. If, for example, you always wanted to fly an older Warbird like the Spitfire or the P-51, well, this gets as real as it gets. Talking about Warbirds, let's take a look at IL-2 Sturmovik, a World War II flight simulator that, of course, yes, you can play in VR. The game runs much better in VR than DCS, so if you really struggle with getting DCS to run in VR, IL-2 might be the one for you. IL-2 doesn't offer modern planes, but has a great variety of World War II planes, campaigns and multiplayer sessions. The planes are not full fidelity. You get in a plane, you press a button and the plane starts up, but the flight mechanics are pretty good, and for such an old game it also looks really good. The multiplayer in VR is quite fun, with some servers offering very nice dynamic and ongoing campaigns, and the career mode, where you create your own pilot and fly missions, are a fantastic experience. Definitely one you should look into, especially if you are into World War II birds. Now, on the list we also have War Thunder. Now, perhaps the most popular flight simulator. Well, can we call this a flight simulator? Compared to all the ones mentioned previously, this one is very arcade-like, but for some reason runs great in VR and is free to try. So if you want to get a hang of flying in VR in general, I would suggest getting War Thunder, but it clearly lacks the realism that you would want from a flight sim. When I want to fly in virtual reality, I want it to be as close as the real deal, and War Thunder is not that. But if you want to get up and shoot others down within 5 minutes, it's the game for you. Happy I called it a game now instead of a simulator. Anyway, let's stay with combat flight simulators, because there is also a pretty unknown one for many newcomers, and that is Falcon BMS. Now, this game was originally released in 1998, I think, or 89. Very old, but there is a very passionate community behind it, 1998 by the way, who have actively modded and changed up the game to what it is now. A pretty good looking VR flight simulator, especially if you are interested in flying the F-16. Now, the biggest win for this game is that it has a fully dynamic campaign, something that is incredibly hard and complex to develop. So much respect for the community and the people that developed this. Something that DCS is trying now to do as well, but we haven't seen it yet. So yeah, if you are an F-16 fan and you want to get the real deal, try out Falcon for BMS in VR. Now let's get away from combat flight sims, and yeah, we have to go, of course, to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Does this sim really need an explanation? I don't think so. Of course, with its graphics, it's a spectacle to be doing in virtual reality, although the graphics make it that it needs quite some settings tweaking to make it run smooth, and especially to make the indicator sharp so not everything is blurry. You can use your controllers for interacting with switches, etc., but definitely not as good as VTOL VR or Aerofly FS4. But again, if you want the real deal for commercial airliners, go for this one, especially if you have a somewhat beefy computer. Now let me know if you know any that are missing in the list and that you fly in virtual reality. The future of VR looks very bright, especially with hardware getting better and more accessible to everyone, and flight simming getting more optimized to run in VR. This is just the beginning. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, subscribe to keep up to date with the latest VR happenings, and I hope to see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.